That song gets me every time. I just wanted to say, I didn't know the exact translation or the definition of transfiguration. It's not a common word. But it means a complete change of form or appearance into a more beautiful or spiritual state. Isn't that nice? And so, hello everybody. Sorry, piecing myself together at that. So I go around, hey, just talking, I'm just talking. There's a giant camera there. I speak all over the place. I love speaking so much, but it's somewhat of a burden because the more I do, it's kind of like, the universe is always either retracting or expanding. Everything is either breathing in, breathing out. When I speak, and I speak about very intimate things, I open up a conversation on a worldwide level, and then people respond. And they oftentimes tell us when we speak on behalf of High Noon stuff that they've never told anybody. And then you hear what's really going on in people's lives. And it's sometimes really heartbreaking, sometimes really moving. The most amazing thing is that it seems like it's time for us to resolve all of these historical woes that are preventing humanity for all these years to really connect with our value of recognizing our own value and recognizing each other's value on a very deep level. But you can only actually do that on the other side of having honest conversations, having open conversations, okay? So although everywhere I go, I do represent High Noon, because I just was talking to the brother here from Korea, and I actually spoke to them at Sun Moon University like a year and a half ago, something like that. I always represent High Noon everywhere I go. But today, actually, High Noon itself started another nonprofit organization called School of Love, schooloflove.org, which is, it's about sexuality largely, but sexuality is all just about intimacy, and intimacy is about a closeness of hearts, right? And so it's learning how to, anyway, I'm going to get into it. So today I'm not going to get into sexuality so much. I'll spare you, because everywhere I go, that's what I talk about, and some people, they start thinking about, the geometry of like how to get out of the room as quickly as possible. But I'm here to talk about this. And so my wife and I do travel a lot, and also part of this is like, in this era, I believe that family is the most important thing in the world. I'm going to get into the details of that. But at the same time, I don't believe that I can just, like all of you, just take care of my family and everything's going to work out fine, because there's a world outside of our family. That world is in a very difficult situation, but there's also so many opportunities right now in history. And so I'm actually going to travel Europe with the High Noon team May and June, like 2 months straight, every day going somewhere else. And I just asked my wife if I can do that. First of all, can I do that? Second of all, if so, where would you like to be? And she has stuff she wants to work on her family, and her mom is in Mongolia. So my wife and 3 sons are going to board an airplane exactly a month from today. It's April 10th. And then I'm going to go tour Europe and then meet up with her in Mongolia. And I'm going to try the untriable, which is turn off my phone for at least a week straight and have no connection with the outside world and just connect with the Mongolian nature, which, if you talk to any Mongolian, is far superior to any other nature anywhere else in the cosmos. So I'm excited about that. So we just have 1 month left here, but we're going to be gone for 5 months. We're coming back here, okay? Our stuff is here. That's our deposit, okay? We're coming back. Not just to collect our stuff, but we love this place, and we really love the community. We love especially the family feeling, right? And we're not perfect, but you guys are doing a great job, and we appreciate all the support. We've received a lot of support, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. But here's the part of the vision that I'm here to talk about, which is we are building God-centered marriages and families that are the dwelling place of God and the cornerstone of a healthy society. So this is a quote from Reverend Moon, which is, where does the heavenly kingdom start? It starts in the family. It does not unfold from somewhere else. The heavenly kingdom is just a 3-dimensional expansion of the family. It is not something that is outside of the family. Therefore, When you embrace your wife or husband, you should think that you are a man and woman becoming one on behalf of all the world. The definition of Chanel Guk, by the way, is when two become one. The family is the place where you substantiate your love for humankind through action, right? And we read this stuff all the time, right? You've probably read a million similar quotes. But the problem with being overexposed to truth is sometimes we become numb to it, or they just become catchphrases or bumper stickers. And the grace that God has given to me is allowing to like go really deep in this and figure out, what do I really believe about this? Because the more I express it, the more I see how connected I am to that. And then I have the opportunity to shame myself or feel horrible about where I'm at, or to get better at making this a reality, right? We have that every day, that opportunity. So the microcosm, we are the microcosm. The family is the microcosm, right? And the tendency typically is that we have very acute senses for how to judge the world. Politics. Anybody want to talk about politics? You think what you think about this president or that president or blah, 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 blah. We have very acute senses at figuring out why they're wrong, why they're insane. And we look at the politicians and they look like a bunch of babies, honestly, right? They look like a bunch of idiots who just do not represent the people in many cases, right? But do we have the same amount of awareness about how we treat our spouse, how we treat our kids, how we treat our parents? A lot of times we don't see how one is in direct reflection of the other, right? And that we can't assume that anybody else, we can't outsource the building of the kingdom of heaven or a peaceful world to anybody else. That's the difficult part of being a part of this movement, is that we actually have to do something. We're not just waiting for something to happen that's going to resolve everything. It's like actually has to start with us. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of mixed feelings that come with that if we're honest with ourselves, right? Here's a quote from the Bible, which is, the kingdom of God will not come with observable signs, nor will people say, look, here it is, or there it is, for you see the kingdom of God is in your midst. And there's a lot of debate in theology about this quote, about Jesus was saying that he is the kingdom and we're in his midst, and then other people who are a little bit more, responsible-minded say, no, the kingdom of heaven starts in us, right? It starts in us. And if not, where else is it going to start? And I've read a lot of quotes from Reverend Moon, too, about this idea that when you die, it's not like some magical thing where all of a sudden everything's just fixed. No, it's like a continuation. What you reap is what you sow. So like the type of person you are here, if you're uncomfortable amongst people here, you're going to be uncomfortable amongst people there. Does that make sense? So like how we treat our spouse here, how we treat our kids, how we treat our parents is really important, because that's what we collect and cash in when we die. That's our reward, but that's also our awkwardness. Yeah? It's good to resolve things here. Okay? You can't give what you don't have. This is a concept that came to me the past few years, which is like, as much as we want to give peace to this world, are we the owners of peace? Meaning, do we control the peace in our own hearts and our own minds? Do we control that? Do we control how we interact with our community, with our family? How nice is it when somebody goes out of their way to research what you actually like and give you that? Isn't that not nice when you get a present and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know you knew that I like this. And they're like, oh yeah, you said it once 3 years ago. And you're like, you listen to me that much? That is so kind, right? How often do we honestly feel listened to? Because a lot of times, especially in our families, we want to be heard so badly. You never listen to me. You always, yeah, but how much do we listen to them, really? When they're talking, how much are we really 100% there? And this is, if you guys want to summarize this entire message, the kingdom of heaven starts the moment you realize that there is no other moment other than right now, and that you find total divinity and joy in everything and oneness with now, right now, like sitting in your chair, and the next now, and the next now, instead of delaying our hopes and dreams for a better future eventually. And my wife and I have been working really hard on that, because honestly, we felt trapped. where we have more ambition than our capabilities. Has anybody ever felt that? That you are more ambitious than you're capable of fulfilling on. So you want to do this and that for this person, but you can barely keep yourself together. Or you feel afraid in your own life, okay? And to me, that's a very painful feeling. Because I have people contacting me all the time. Just a week ago, I had a kid, a second generation in I'm not going to tell you where, but he called me from a psychiatric ward. He's having a mental breakdown. And I was so busy. I had so much stuff. I was like, nothing is more important than this guy right here, right now. And at least I could offer him my time and my attention, but I wish I could give him more. And so I want to make it my mission to be able to have more time, more energy, more money so that I could fly over. And oh, you're in trouble? I'm there. Pack my things. Wouldn't that be a nice feeling? So that there's no limitation. God calls you. There's it's just you. Okay, I need to do this, and you do it. That's training. That's a skill set, and we can do that. Okay. Whoa. So this is a concept too that I've been working on, because when I go around, I'm talking about very personal stuff, right? Especially pornography addiction and things like that, which is very personal. People feel very judged when you start talking about this stuff. But people feel equally judged when you start talking about the ideal in great detail. Because the more that we talk about ideal families and all that, anybody may be struggling to achieve this, our concept of an ideal family. Maybe we fight with our spouse a little bit too much, or our kids don't listen to us, or whatever it is. And we feel judged a lot of times when we look at our ideal, when we communicate with our ideal. I notice this so much because sometimes when you bring up the ideal or the direction that we would like to go, people end up going to a dark place instead of a happy place, right? It's very strange. And then I realized, it's because we're in a constant relationship with our own ideals. And a lot of us have actually a very dysfunctional relationship with our ideals. Maybe we're not clear about what we actually believe. Maybe we want something, but we feel we can never actually get that. Because when I start asking people about Chanel Guk, what does a peaceful world look like? People get very fuzzy on the details because we haven't actually really thought this thing out, what we're working towards. What does an ideal relationship look like between you and your spouse or your eventual spouse? What does that actually taste like? What does that feel like? What does an ideal relationship look like with your kids? It's going to look different in every single family. What does it look like to you? If we don't think about it, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. We have to actually make it. We're supposed to be the owners of Chanel Guk, meaning the creators, the co-creators with God, but we're responsible for it, right? So if we're unclear, here's some questions, but, it's not there, sorry. This idea of if your ideal was manifested as a person, okay, your ideals, your hopes, your dreams for the future, for your spouse, for whatever, if these were all in one person, would that person be your best friend? Would you feel really close? If they called, would you pick up and say, hey, how you doing, ideals? Or if they called, you'd be like, voicemail, straight to voicemail, not home. Honestly. And I realized I brought this up. I was actually speaking in Germany last weekend, and I brought it up with, there's all the HARP and CARP leaders and kind of youth leaders and stuff like that. And one guy brought up this amazing notion that in times of need, actually it's for him, his ideals are somebody that he connects with when he's losing hope, because his ideals lift his spirits, right? But he doesn't connect to his ideals in good times, only when he's out of options kind of thing. So it's kind of like when you get that call and they're like, hey, you want to go out for lunch? And then you find out really it's because their friend canceled on them and they had like a reservation and they're only calling you out of desperation. And it takes you from like, to, okay, yeah, I'll come, right? Sometimes that's how we treat God. Sometimes that's how we treat our own ideals. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me? Because it's important that wherever you're at with your ideals, it's really important to be clear on what your ideals are. And again, those are going to change when you get down to the details from person to person, and that's good because we're all unique. So to figure that out is extremely important and get really clear on those ideals. But to also figure out where are you in respect to your ideals? Are you really far away? Are you really close? Are you totally off in some other space? And to be okay with that. Because the other option is to feel like your ideals are so far away and you'll never reach them, and then something inside of you starts to lose faith. You might still come to church, you might still say the words or whatever, but something deep inside of you has actually lost faith that that's ever going to come true. And you've actually written off your future as it's just going to be more of the same of this. Yeah? Has anybody else felt that? So it's like learning, I think all of us at some point have lost hope in our own future. But this is because we've built a dysfunctional relationship with our own ideals, okay? It's all coming back to the family, okay? It's not esoteric nonsense. This is part of it this is our families, right? So what happens when our family is in crisis? Do we just throw in the towel? Do we just start living in frustration and feeling so ashamed that our family isn't a postcard family, a Hallmark family, right? Christianity has created like the Hallmark station. You guys ever watch a movie on the Hallmark station? I want to vomit every time I watch one of those movies. They're so cheesy. It's like, hey, Mom, hey, Dad. It's so unrealistic, right? It doesn't really deal with the nitty-gritty. And also, media doesn't provide us with the opportunity to see what is passion like after a five-year difficult portion in our marriage. What does it look like to be married for 50 years and 20 of those years you're fighting, but you figured it out. I heard from somebody in this room, I feel like, I was having a conversation and they said, you don't even know your spouse until you've been married for 20 years. What? Our 7-year anniversary is coming up. We're still in the honeymoon phase, I guess, according to that math. Right? But we don't have even a concept of what the future looks like as an 85-year-old couple who's still making out in public settings. And some people think, oh, that's gross. That's beautiful. A couple who can't keep their hands off of each other because they're only intensifying in their love. And if you can't visualize it, then you don't believe it, and you just anticipate that the future is going to just be more of the present. Does that make sense? Because when your family's in difficulty, it's really important to understand that that's okay. You might not be at your ideal, but you can work through it. Otherwise, honestly, I talk to a lot of families, and they're just so ashamed of what their family is now that they make all of their decisions based on that shame, and it only makes things worse. So the worst sins of all, this is from Reverend Moon again, the worst of all sins is to shatter something and then scatter the pieces in all directions. Also, the worst and most hated of all enemies is the one who has destroyed love. There is no devil more atrocious than the devil who makes it impossible for children to love their parents and who destroys a couple's relationship so they cannot love each other as husband and wife. In my opinion, our job is to identify what these devils are in our life. Because as I said, I go around the world and the world over, pornography is definitely one of these things. It's one of these things. It's one of many it's one of the most prevalent because we carry these things everywhere, so it just kind of stalks us. It's an easy out. I want to escape reality. I want to feel something chemically, so I'm gonna escape into my phone. It doesn't make anything any better. It actually makes things worse. But we all have these things. For me personally, it's in my relationship with my wife, it's judgment. The biggest devil in me, how I look at my wife, is the judgment that she feels when I expect something more perfection from her. When she can't give me enough, I just feel like, why aren't you working harder? This kind of thing. It's really torn our relationship it's frayed us. But in your relationship, with your parents, if you're younger, with your friends, with yourself, it's important to also look at yourself. What are these devils? How is it manifesting, this thing that's ripping apart your relationships? And I wanted to talk about that a bit, if you don't mind. I asked my wife ahead of time if I can get honest with you guys, and if that's okay with you, stay in the room. If you guys don't like honesty, there's 2 exits that I can see, and there's also a bathroom that you can hide in. But like, part of the reason why we ended up in Colorado is because, after we had our second son in Maryland, my wife was dealing with some crazy postpartum stuff. And I was a pastor of a community, hundreds of people. And I was asking people for help because I didn't know what was going on, right? And a lot of people were saying she's going insane, right? People saying things about my wife like, what are you going to do with her? Like I was supposed to do something. And I was like, I don't know. They put her on medication. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. That's like a lifelong decision that affects her forever, right? And plus, maybe she doesn't want it. But she was acting really strange, yeah? And I was losing my wife. It was really hard because I was like working my butt off. And I'd go around and I'd have all these meetings, and I'd come home and my wife wasn't there. She was somewhere else. She was in another world, and it was unmanageable. And I became so kind of ashamed of this situation because I was a pastor too, right? I was supposed to be some leader, and I couldn't bridge this. And it was just insanely painful. And that went on for quite a while, yeah? And I asked a bunch of people, honestly, to help. And a lot of them were like, yeah, I'm really busy. I'm like, if we don't have a community that can support each other in times like this, then we don't have a community. We just have a bunch of blobs of flesh, sitting next to each other. And that wasn't everybody, but that was just my experience with a lot of people. And I was so frustrated that from then on, I just realized, okay, we got to move. We got to go to somewhere where we can get help. Because part of the problem of being an idealist is we suck at asking for help. Because we think, especially in our church, everybody wants to be a Messiah. Because we're supposed to be tribal Messiahs. It's a church filled with Messiahs. That means everybody's trying to save the world in their own way, and nobody's helping each other, and we're all, and we don't know how to ask for help because we're supposed to lift the world by ourselves. And that's not a strength, actually, I realized. That's a weakness. That's a huge weakness. We need to learn how to ask, because what you're doing is if you try to do everything yourself, you're preventing other people from getting the blessing of helping another person. You're preventing their growth and your own growth by trying to do everything yourself. Yeah? And young moms have it tough. Crying babies, it's hard. And so I remember at one point in time, we're talking about the family, talking about School of Love, I realized that I was turning in to my dad. And I don't know that I want this on the internet because I am getting kind of raw. But I was turning into my dad. My parents split up, and part of it was because my dad didn't know how to cope with frustration, and he would just get more and more frustrated and would bottle up, and it would just cause this separation. And then my mom would become a victim, and that was their thing, and that was manifesting in our relationship. And I got to a point when we were driving. My dad was actually visiting, which was compounding the problem. And I was driving with my wife. We'd just gone to the store. And she just started hyperventilating. That was something that was progressively getting worse and worse. She was getting anxiety where she couldn't even breathe. I was looking at her, and she's like, it was so painful to watch. And she was hyperventilating. She started crying. She said, I pulled over, and she looked at me, and she said, do I have to buy? Kills me every time. She's like, do I have to pay for your time, for you to care about me? And I was like, on the one hand, I was so hurt because she was hurt. On the other hand, I was so angry at her. It was like, don't you know how hard I work for this family? I do everything. I'm dying for this family. But I realized I was doing everything for everybody else. I was a pastor. I was helping everybody else. But she needed me. She needed me. Have you guys seen Where Dreams May Come, that movie? It's like I wasn't willing to go into the hell that she was in. I was trying to lift her up into my world, and it was only making things worse because I wasn't willing to go down to where she was at that time and give everything, and that caused a massive rift. And things didn't get better after that, but it left something in me that it was like, okay, we have to, this is serious, you know. So after a certain point, I was really realizing, like, as much as I want to help other people right now, and I want to race to this finish line of chanoguk and helping people, there's no such thing. That's something unique to our faith, that there is no heaven. You can't be in heaven if your family's not there with you. It's miserable. If you win something or you have some accomplishment, but there's nobody to share it with, you've lost, actually. You've lost. And we can look in the world. This has just happened recently with Jeff Bezos. You guys know? Like, the richest man in the world that everybody idolizes. He's the god of the world. He's going to take us to all these other planets. Got caught having an affair on his wife, and she's going to take half of his wealth. He's got nothing. In my opinion, he's got nothing. He's the richest external guy in the world. He's got nothing because he just lost his family, right? And so I realized this in a moment. Took me a while to fix it, right? It's not like, oh, I fell off a horse and now I'm a Christian. No, it's not like that. We don't get that often. The St. Paul experience. It's like, oh, this is kind of like a low point and now we have to dig ourselves out. And so we actually, the point of why I'm bringing all this up is because I realize that as much as I want this ideal out there for the world, I can't do it if my family's in shambles, right? And I have to invest in my family. So then we scaled back, and then I ended up quitting as a pastor because I realized I never had a Saturday off for like 5 years or something. So then I started taking weekends off and investing in my family, enjoying moments with my family. And then we went traveling, and it was still really stressful, and it was still kind of like this, but we were enjoying more and more, and it's still been like this. But this community has helped tremendously, because even with our last kid, towards the last, I was in Korea speaking. I went there just to speak one day, and then I was getting messages, your wife is having panic attacks and all this stuff. But we had Mira really helping my wife, and Yuri actually slept in our bed, Yuri Ichinohe, and it was like comforting my wife because she was having panic issues. That was but I raced home. I came home early. I literally spoke and then got in a cab and just like bolted to the airport. I came back a day early. But this is huge, right? If we're really trying to make these families, we have to really be there for each other. We have to, and we want to. And my wife and I really want to work on ourselves so we can have more capacity to take care of more people. But we can't if we're always strained, because you bring that into the world. If you're stressed out and you want to help somebody, but you're stressed, you're not helping them. You're bringing that stress wherever you go, yeah? So it's learning how to really take care of ourselves. And this is, I'm going to make a bold statement, but this is not just me having some revelation on a couch like some university student. Like, this is after hundreds of conversations of seeing people in the doldrums of hell and helping them climb out of there and being in a really happy place. Is that connection is actually the purpose of life. And it's the fulfillment of the 3 great blessings is connection. Connection to yourself, the first blessing. Connection really to yourself. Really being okay in your own skin, loving yourself. Really letting God flow through you naturally. Because our life is just like learning how to become vessels for everything good. It's like getting out of the way, right? And that's what we're teaching our kid. With the second blessing, we're not, like, part of our kids' education is they're going to Mongolia, the countryside, for like 3 months or 4 months, right? And for a lot of people, like, what about school? It's like, that is school to me. That is learning how to connect with God. But we want to teach them skills, but not for the skills themselves so they can get a job, but so that they can be the most efficient vehicles for goodness to work through. That if they have an idea for a song, just comes out of them because they've trained. Or if they have an idea for some invention, they know the science and all that to make it happen as efficiently as possible. Does that make sense? That's a connection that can only happen if my wife and I are connected. Because when we're doing well, we are emotionally and mentally so available for our kids. And they can grow so much in that love. Otherwise, we're giving them stress. And when you're stressed out, it actually causes your brain to tense up, your body to tense up. It's actually really, really bad for you. Stress is the new smoking, for sure. The stats are in. It's overwhelming how bad stress is for your physical body, for your mental well-being spiritually. It's horrible. So working on yourself is then to be able to offer your mind, your body, your heart, and your spirit to another person so that you can do that with your family. And if your family is really working on that, and the more we are, the more that I can go around in the world and she'll be okay. The more that I can come back to a home that's okay, right? But if I'm leaving and we're stressed out and she's stressed out when I'm traveling, then everything starts to fall apart. Then all of my ambitions to help other people, they don't happen. Yeah, so this is, that doesn't say anything. That's just a block. You used to say something. That's meant to be your ideals. So when your mind, your heart, your spirit, and your body are all moving in the same direction towards your ideals, that's when you start really feeling the flow of life working through you more naturally, okay? And I'm going to skip that. I want to go into this now because my wife and I have been really working on this. Because again, I guess difficulties are always opportunities to have a lot of growth, yeah? And so right before my last son, who's now 5 months, was coming into this world, I was having massive anxiety. And every single night, I was waking up between 2 or 3 a.m., and I really couldn't go back to sleep. I was just super stressed out. And so I realized that I was getting sicker. I was more stressed out with my wife and my kids. So I really was like, I've been reading so much about meditation. I was like, I want to go a million miles deep with learning how to like calm myself. This is part of going back, even though sometimes, True Father said, like even though you might get blessed and have kids, you still have to go back and fix the first blessing because we get blessed before we're really mature, honestly speaking. We have a lot of stuff to clean up. So sometimes we have to vacillate between first and third and second and all that. And I had to go back to the first in order to take care of my family, right? So I started doing a ton of meditation and trial and error and being like, feeling like an idiot and like feeling like I belong in Whole Foods eating wheatgrass or something like that. Just feeling like something like this is not me, like me means something, right? But just learning how to like let go. All these are just concepts that I have. And one of the amazing things is that the more that I just started working on myself and showing up to my family more peacefully, then my wife actually, incidental to me, it was just the fact that I stopped being so stressed out, allowed her the space. Now she's doing meditation too, religiously you could say, but whatever, new agey. But it's been helping her so much. And so this has been an experiment that you can actually experiment. It's like, which part, again, what are those devils? Mine was judgmentalism and stress and anxiety. So how do I work on that? Learning how to really appreciate each moment. How do I do that? A lot of it is actually through breathing for me, right? Working so much on my breathing. And now we've had so many more tender moments between us, stopping and hugging and kissing in front of our kids, in the kitchen, in the morning. Stress levels going down so much, and it's helped our family become more available. Yesterday, we took another Mongolian American family out for lunch, and we just really loved them up. It's such a wonderful experience for all of us. And we could only do that because we're available to them. We can really be there for them because everybody in the family is plus. We can be a plus because we're not like a vacuum. A lot of times when we're stressed out, we're a vacuum we need from other people. But when you're really taken care of, you're a plus. You can look out and say, what do you need? And your senses are more attuned to other people's needs because you have more bandwidth, okay? This is a concept that I call becoming Goliath. And it's this, that I think the David and Goliath story is very misunderstood because we don't dwell on the fact that David didn't see this monster as a big monster. Everybody else saw this giant monster and a little guy, but in his mind, he had actually conquered monsters already, protecting his flock, yeah? Whenever like a bear or a lion would come and try to kill his flock, he would defend them and kill them. So he already had experience. So when he looked at beasts, he was like, I've taken down monsters scarier than that. Like, what's scarier, a big guy or a mountain lion? A mountain lion, they're ferocious. They'll rip you to pieces. So in his mind, the odds were on his side. Nobody else saw that, right? Because he went through a process of building himself up. So that's what I've seen when you have an addiction or you have some problem is that you never try to fight the problem because it's way bigger than you and you know it and it knows it. So just to use pornography as a metaphor, because that's what I deal with, is like when people just try to fight pornography, no, they always lose. They get crushed by it. What you need to do is slowly remove the power and change the scale so that you become bigger than the problem. And that's by proving that you can do it little by little, by building integrity every day, making small steps of saying, I can do this, and then doing it, experimenting with what works and what doesn't work. Okay? And this, when we're strained with our family too, is like some people need therapy. Some people just need to go out on more dates. Some people need to sit down with their kids and just listen and not say anything, not give any advice. Just listen. How are you doing? Asking really good questions so that the kid feels like, wow, they're listening. How often do we just sit down and etch out 2 hours just with our kid, just to listen to them, so they feel heard? But figuring all this out, this is the joy of life, is learning what we need to work on, right? And at this point in history, I can clearly see, just by going around and seeing, that connection is the most important and limited resource in the world. But it's the most important thing, and every resolution is going to come from connection. Everything that we strive for as human race will come through connection. Yeah? And it's always been one thing or another, war, religion, all these things that have separated us and divide us and put us into these little boxes. But now it's time that we really get into connection. But again, you have to first connect with yourself, and then connect with your spouse and your family, and then you help your family connect with the world. And I want to go into an example of this, okay? This is just one example, but in my readings, I have to read a lot because I talk a lot, and I want to speak from an informed place. But this is a story about Japan, what's going on in Japan right now. It's insane. They're at a population crisis right now in Japan. Japan suffered its biggest population decline on record ever this year, according to new figures that underline the country's losing battle to raise its birth rate, the lowest numbers since comparable to when records began in 1899. Right? So people aren't having babies. The government also did a study that found that studies showed that around 43% of people between 18 and 34, when you are in the most sexually active and all this stuff on a societal level, are virgins, actually. They're not interacting, and 64 aren't in any sexual relationships, 64%. And it's not because they're all becoming Mormons. You know, the Mormon church or joining our church. It's not for religious, righteous reasons, actually. If you start digging deeper in this, it's because people are more and more isolated. They're not even talking to people. AI is on the rise. Pornography is out of control over there. They're slowly retracting and going into their own space. But this is not just them. It's the same thing is happening here. The same thing is definitely happening all over Europe. I don't know about Africa so much. We haven't been there yet. I don't know if you know the stats about the birth rate over there. But Southeast Asia, similar situation. But the point is this, okay? The reason why you would opt out of hanging out with people is because people become scary to you. You don't know how to handle people, the nuance of people, and you just want to get to the good stuff. That's what pornography is just an excuse to get all the good stuff without the actual nourishment of our souls, which is connection, okay? And I'm telling you, like, people are starved for connection. As tribal messiahs, that's the greatest thing that we could give somebody is connection, love, listening to them, spending time with them. And that starts also with each other. Yeah? The greatest thing that we have in terms of this movement is anywhere you go in this world, you have a home. We've been let into people's lives where they treat us like they've known us for 50 years, longer than I've been alive, after meeting them for 5 minutes. Every country we've ever been to, we've been welcomed like we came out of them, like parents just taking care of us, brothers and sisters. It's the most amazing thing. But I feel like we're not leveraging that enough. We're not really taking advantage of all these people in the room. There's somebody in this room that needs your help. There's somebody in this room that can help you and wants to help you. They just don't know it because we don't talk enough. Yeah? We don't talk enough. We don't get into each other's lives enough and take that extra hour or two to find out what the person's really going through. Because what's crazy is even after I talk to all these people around the world, I still assume that everybody's just okay because we're really good at putting on this I'm okay face. But when you really talk to people, everybody's going through something, yeah? Everybody. It doesn't mean that everybody's like in a state of crisis, but we could all use a helping hand. Even if you're doing well, it's so nice to have somebody to share that with, right? Because a lot of times we want to be humble and be like, oh, I'm not that great. No, we're all amazing. I mean, we're all children of God, right? We're meant to inherit the entire cosmos. Why can't we celebrate that once in a while and be like, how's the cosmos doing, right? Like, let's party a little bit and celebrate. If somebody wins, let's lift each other up. For God's sake. For God's sake. For God's actual sake. So this is our website. I just want to give a shout out. School of Love is what High Noon will turn into. I asked Uncle David, he's the founder of, and Mitzway. They're the founders of High Noon. And High Noon is a response to a crisis, an epidemic in this world. But it's just a response to a crisis. But what we're realizing, that connection is actually the antidote. And School of Love is the Chanel Guk response because it's building a situation where we don't need to respond to a crisis because we're dissolving the crisis. Because what High Noon has turned into is we're like an adopted sibling or an adopted parent where we're having the conversations that should really be happening within the family. And again, if family is the school of love, that's the good and the bad and the ugly. It's learning how to get through difficult situations. It's learning how to have really difficult conversations. It's learning how to talk about, I have 3 boys, so we talk about penises a lot in our family because I want them to talk to me and not Google. Google doesn't know anything. Google's an idiot. I don't like Google is a nameless, faceless, like I'm their dad. They came out of my penis, for God's sakes. So I should be able to talk to them about their penises, yeah? Right? And some people are offended by even the mention of penis, but True Father is very clear that our shame and association with sex is linked to the fall. Doesn't mean we need to be gratuitous or crass, but at least within our families, that's people are yearning for, and our hearts are constantly scanning for where we can belong, where we're going to get our needs met. And if they're not met in the family, we're going to go elsewhere. Gangs are always just a bunch of guys who didn't get love from fathers, who didn't get brotherly love, and they're accepted without question. Maybe they have to get beat up or whatever, but after that, totally embraced. And it's because they're not getting it from the family. And it'll continue until we meet people's needs in the family. And this is our family too, right? This is our family. And the pastors can't do everything. I was a pastor so many times, I was like, why don't you guys do it? If I'm doing everything, it's unnatural. This is like the government. Don't wait for me. You guys do it, right? So that's why I try to initiate stuff here. But, everybody has a need. Does anybody in this room not have any needs, like whatsoever? Any emotional needs? Any androids in this room? Robots? Communists? Just kidding. Just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. So I just wanted to end. There's a video. Is it there? When was the last time you talked to your kids about sex? For most of us, the talk was an awkward conversation that kind of happened once. Both parent and child were relieved when it ended, and no one brought it up again. This has created a void. Young people, during the most formative and uncertain time in their lives, have been left to fend for themselves when it comes to learning about sex. At School of Love, we believe that sex is an awesome God-given gift and that it should be learned about at home in a loving and thoughtful way, not on a school bus or from a search engine. Imagine being the one to help your child appreciate the beautiful value of his or her sexuality. No dirtiness, no shame. Imagine sex being an openly talked about topic throughout your child's formative years. Imagine being your child's first choice when it came to having their questions answered. We will give you the tools you need to not just have the talk, but ongoing conversations, so that you can teach your children about sex as they mature in a very personalized and rewarding way. We will help you transform uncomfortable discussions about sex that cause fear and anxiety for most parents into conversations that are healthy, joyful, and even fulfilling. Teach your child about sex the way God intended it to be in the place God wanted it taught. After all, family is the school of love. So we're just starting out. We're creating resources. Yeah, thank you. We're creating resources, but we're just starting to build them. But again, this goes for any difficult conversation, is that just like dancing in the beginning, it's very clunky and awkward, but the more you do it, the more it actually becomes enjoyable. And the same with when you have, stuff with depression, whatever it is, that we can talk about it within our family, and that it becomes actually a fulfilling, enjoyable thing, that we long for honesty, right? And again, my kids are still pretty young, but we've already really started talking about all these issues, sex and stuff like that, about watching what happens if some kid shows you naked people on a screen. They just come to me. Whatever happens, I said, I can't guarantee that I'm going to do the right thing, but we'll figure it out. Just come to me. Let's always work things out together as a family, yeah? So, and that just goes for everything. And I hope that we can do that together as a family, because it would be so nice to have honest conversations with people. It's so nice. Sometimes it's so awkward, and you're so afraid that people are going to judge you when they find out that you're not perfect. But the reality is nobody actually thinks anybody's perfect here. But when you start to talk about these things, actually you get to realize that you didn't know the person at all. We just assume a lot about them, but we don't know what each other have gone through. And then you can actually learn to love them and respect them on a much deeper level, okay? So that's it. Thank you, guys. I will pray if that's okay. Can I pray? You guys trust me enough after that to pray?